Guess I should have known it wouldn't be that easy. Can't exactly fault you for trying. We're gonna have to do this the hard way, huh? Yep. Cursed Island, here we come. Guess your one little trip might be a bit longer than you planned, eh, mate? Bruh, I've been scammed. Techno? Yeah? I can't help but feel like I made a mistake. What do you mean? The locket? I shouldn't have tried to throw it away like that. Hey, it was worth a shot. No harm, no foul. Maybe. Something wrong? Just a bad feeling, mate. The ginger-haired boy, the one that washed up with Wilbur, is back. It's not the first time they've seen him since his rescue. He slinks about the boat like a sly fox, sticking close to Wilbur's side for the most part. He seems friendly enough, bright and eager, willing to lend a hand as needed, and able to strike up a conversation with just about anyone. He has an odd fascination with Phil, though. Right now, he's watching Phil with an odd look in his eye. He stands near Ronbu, peering out from behind him as if he can somehow hide himself from view. His brows are furrowed, though not in anger, but more confusion? Curiosity, perhaps? He's behaving rather like an animal, shying away from prying eyes, yet maintaining the tiniest little glitter of mischief in his gaze. He fits right in with Tommy, Tubbo, and Ronbu, all three of whom have apparently adopted the boy into their ranks. Hence why they're all currently above deck, levying their pistols and boasting about a shootout that Tubbo is almost guaranteed to win. They're all focused on the game, setting wagers and egging each other on with taunts and teases, save for their newest addition, who can't seem to take his eyes off of Phil. And Phil notices him, too. With a sigh, his first mate finally turns toward the boy and gives the slightest little wave. Hi, mate. His voice is soft, that same tone he always used with Ronbu when the boy first joined the Argo's crew. The boy, Fundy, if Technoblade remembers right, smiles, bright and wide, and waves back. If he had a tail, it'd be wagging, for the way he rocks on his heels and straightens up with a twinkle in his eyes. He looks as though he wants to say something, but then there's a commotion as Tommy drags someone else up from below deck amidst teasing and laughter. It's Wilbur. The man has been healing well after finally waking up. He's been able to safely roam the ship on his own, his recovery excelling and his stubbornness even more so. Much to Phil's evident displeasure, he's made fast friends with the crew's younger members, particularly Tommy, who clings to him like a second skin, watching eagerly for his approval at every turn. Even now, as Tommy leads Wilbur toward the group, he's watching the taller man with a hopeful glint that makes him look so young and childish, like an eager little brother up to no good. I don't know about this, Wilbur says with a smile as he's brought to the center of the group. Not exactly the best shot. I've always been more of a talker than a fighter, if I'm quite honest. Phil makes a soft noise of affirmation beside him, although Technoblade doesn't think the man did it consciously. His friend is rigid beside him, the shoulder that brushes his own tense and unyielding. He and his son, to Technoblade's knowledge, have scarcely seen one another since Wilbur first woke up, let alone spoken. The tension is palpable, and the hollowed look in Phil's eyes makes fury spark anew in his gut. He wants to wipe that smug smirk off of Wilbur's face. Anything to see Phil smile again. Tommy's voice rings out loudly across the waters, surely waking any dozing crew members with his fervor. Oh, come on, man. Show us what you got. His eyebrows waggle. Or are you too scared? Tommy, not giving him even a second to respond, practically shoves the pistol into Wilbur's hands, the man muffling a quiet laugh as he finally accepts. Phil tenses beside him. It'll be fine, he murmurs softly to his friend. If he tries anything, we're both right here. Phil gives a stiff nod. He doesn't look convinced. Wilbur's attention is now fully devoted to the weapon in his hands, scrutinizing it as though it isn't entirely to his liking. Nevertheless, his grin widens at the other boy's urging, and he fixes them with a look that promises nothing but a good show. Wilbur gives the pistol an experimental twirl, weighing it before releasing the safety with an audible click, squinting down at the mechanism through thick lenses. Phil, suddenly finding himself staring down the barrel by chance alone, recoils as though he's been shot. He staggers backward, his hands jerking upward as if to raise them, blue eyes wide and panicked for just the briefest moment before clarity strikes him. He's quick to lower his hands and plaster a smile back on his face, but it's fake and forced and far too strained, and he's not fooling anyone. Least of all Wilbur. The gun is back in Tommy's hands in an instant, the man pulling away as if it burned his hands to even touch, his gaze wide-eyed and fixed on his father. He opens his mouth as if to say something, but no sound comes out, save for a soft exhale as Phil makes a swift and abrupt exit from the scene without another word. He slams the door to Technoblade's cabin shut behind him and leaves the merry mood to shrivel up into nothingness in his wake. Wilbur slumps against the railing. Tommy retreats back to Tubbo's side. Ronbu looks after Phil as if he wants to follow, and Technoblade. Without so much as a warning, Technoblade marches up, seizes Wilbur by the collar, and hoists him upright to meet his gaze. "This isn't my fight," he says quietly. "But if it was, you'd have been thrown overboard days ago." And his grip loosens, allowing the man a moment to breathe, wide brown meeting angry red. "Fix this. Soon. I've given Phil the benefit of the doubt in letting you stay aboard my ship. Don't make me regret it." His lip curls, and for a moment he allows himself to stare into the eyes of the one who betrayed his friend. He doesn't know what he expects to find there. Malice, maybe, or something more sly, more discreet. But all he finds is overwhelming guilt. He's taken aback, and his grip slackens enough for the man to pull away, clutching at his throat with the other hand raised placatingly. As he stares into Wilbur's devastated expression, he's struck by the sudden realization that things might not be as simple as he thought. He opens his mouth, to question or to threaten, he's not sure, but whatever words begin to form are quickly cut short by a loud noise from his cabin. Something shatters, splintering against the hardwood of the deck, and Technoblade decides this conversation can wait. Wilbur can wait. Phil needs him more. He gives one last glare of warning before stepping away, struggling to maintain a facade of calm dignity as he crosses the deck to his cabin in just a few quick strides. He slips inside without a word, careful to shut and latch the door behind him before summoning the will to look at whatever scene of destruction might meet him. His ceramic plate from the previous night's dinner is in 1,000 tiny pieces across the floorboards, and Phil is on his knees beside it, looking as though it personally insulted him. On the outside, his friend is bristling. His eyes narrowed, his teeth gritted, his shoulders squared as if ready for a fight. But Technoblade can see his mask starting to slip. A hitch to his breathing that speaks of incoming panic, and a glint of fear raw in his eyes as he stares down at the shards. "Phil?" He moves slowly, as if approaching a wild animal rather than his friend. He might as well be one, for the way he puffs up at the sound of Technoblade's voice before he recognizes him, his teeth baring in the faintest hint of a snarl before he works to school his expression into something neutral. "Hey, Tech," Phil says, dropping the final syllable in a way that screams exhaustion, lifting a trembling hand to pinch the bridge of his nose. Sorry about the mess, mate. I'll clean it up, just give me a moment, Shit! His hand slips on the wood as he shifts, and he moves to brace himself, his fingers skidding across the wood and ceramic alike, a sharp hiss of pain escaping him. Technoblade is quick to drop to his knees beside him, gingerly curling his fingers around slender wrists and pulling his friend's hands away from the mess, humming in gentle disapproval as fresh blood begins to beat up along his new cuts. "Phil, it's okay. I'll clean it up. You just... And he sighs, squeezing the man's wrists for a moment. Go sit on the bed, okay? I'll get something for those scratches. Phil makes a noise of protest, but allows himself to be guided up from the floor and over to the mattress. His shoulders are shaking by the time they reach it, and he leans his weight heavily on Technoblade's shoulders. He practically drags Technoblade down with him when he flops onto the bed, fingers still tangled in his coat, and Technoblade is helpless but to go along with him, abandoning his hopes of tidying the mess in lieu of pulling his friend into a tight embrace. Phil immediately buries his face in his shoulder with a jagged sigh, his grip around Technoblade's waist so tight it almost hurts. Technoblade doesn't let go. I don't know if I can trust him, Techno, Phil admits softly. He sounds tired. Last time I saw him with a gun in his hands, Fuck. It was pointed at me. Technoblade can feel Phil's chest stuttering for breath from where it's pressed against his own, and he trails his fingers gently between his friend's shoulder blades, rubbing tiny circles there. Breathe, Phil. He urges softly, putting aside his friend's words for now, focused only on bringing him down from the panic. He can't afford to get angry, not when Phil is barely keeping it together as it is. I'm sorry, Phil says, and the words nearly break his heart. This is stupid. I'm being stupid. I shouldn't be freaking out. Fuck, this is such bullshit. Technoblade shushes him, his arm tightening around Phil until he makes a quiet little oof. It's not stupid, Phil. If you think feeling stressed because a guy who betrayed you was pointing a gun at your face is dumb, then so is me being scared of water. What'd the crew say if they could see me? Phil rasps, as if he hasn't heard Technoblade at all, and then he laughs, sharp and bitter. Captain Filza, the angel of death, panicking over getting a fucking pistol pointed at him. His breath quickens into another breathy giggle. I've survived hundreds of battles. Hell, I've been shot and stabbed and on my deathbed, but I can't even handle looking at my own son without falling apart. His head tips forward until his brow is resting in the crook of Technoblade's neck, the fight draining out of him until he's nearly limp against him. Maybe it's a good thing you're captain now. Phil. No, Techno, it's... Gods. Phil's head raises so that he can properly drop his chin onto Technoblade's shoulder. Look at me, mate. I can't lead like this. I don't know if I ever will again. I'm a fucking wreck. A disaster waiting to happen if you hadn't been there when you found Will. Phil's eyes look hollow and distant. If you hadn't been there, I would have just frozen up. The whole crew would have been without a captain while I wallowed in self-pity. Despite the way his breathing has begun to mellow, Phil doesn't seem keen on moving from their embrace. Frankly, Technoblade doesn't want to either. He tells himself it's for the sake of Phil, but his friend is a comfortable weight against him, fitting perfectly into his arms like a missing puzzle piece. He doesn't know the last time he held someone like this. Besides Phil, at least. It's been a long time. Too long. He doesn't want it to end just yet. He doesn't know how to comfort Phil. Half of it is true. Phil had fled at the first sight of his son, and had he been in charge, the crew would have indeed floundered at the loss of their captain. But there's something else motivating Phil's words. The bitterness of a former captain left to die by his crew. Phil's confidence has been extinguished by that event like a candle in the sea, and Technoblade doesn't know whether he'll ever fully be able to rebuild to his former glory. There's something simply sad about it, because, for all the rumors he's heard of Captain Filza in his days in the Navy, never once had anyone doubted his ability to lead. And yet, here they are. Phil is one step away from the edge of a precipice, and Technoblade is clinging desperately to him, as if to hold him back from the fall. One wrong move, one misspoken word, and the ledge will crumble beneath his friend's feet. It's okay, feels like a blatant lie, and "it's going to be all right" might turn out to be promising false hope. He has no idea what the future holds for them. And so he settles for something else, something he hopes might still offer some comfort. "I couldn't do this without you," he murmurs honestly, his heart aching when Phil moves just a little closer at his words. "Give yourself some credit. Even if you aren't the captain anymore, you're still the one who brought this whole crew together, right?" When Phil finally, mercifully, gives the smallest of nods into his shoulder, Technoblade continues on. "I might not really know what things were like before. What you were like before, but the Phil I know? The one who's stubborn and reckless and bullheaded and frankly a bit of a bastard." Phil gives a hiccupy giggle. "That's the one who's my first mate, not the other guy. That's the one." He nearly chokes up, his own emotions swelling as his tongue stumbles over the word that started to become like second nature each time he thinks of the man. The man who's currently curled up in his arms, suddenly so small and vulnerable and trusting, when months ago they had been at each other's throats, ready to kill without hesitation. Those same blue eyes that were once narrowed in feral defiance from behind iron bars now blink fondly up at him, the smallest of smiles tugging at the pirate's lips. "That Phil?" Technoblade continues, and delights in the genuine smile his next words elicit. "That's the Phil who's my friend." Phil's been distancing himself from the crew. It starts out small, the man spending a little more time than average up in the crow's nest. He's still around to perform his duties, but the rest of the time, he's either up on the mast or hiding somewhere else out of sight. Despite Technoblade's best efforts, despite all of the reassurances, it progressively worsens as the days go by, and soon enough Phil is absent for nearly every gathering, even mealtimes. The crew has begun to notice. Although Technoblade knows the reason behind Phil's actions, Phil's paranoia steadily building now that the person who betrayed him is back on board, the rest of the crew does not, and the man has pointedly kept his mouth shut about the relationship between himself and their unexpected guests. Wilbur has done the same. They hardly spare each other even a glance. If Technoblade didn't already know their history, he would have thought them to be total strangers, like the crew does. They don't see Phil's careful glances over his shoulder. They don't see the tension in every movement, the new edge he holds himself with, the faintest flicker of fear in his eyes when someone comes up behind him. All they see is a first mate who will scarcely talk to them, let alone spend time with them, and the effect is devastating on the crew's morale. Life on the seas is long and arduous, and tensions often begin to run high toward the tail end of a voyage, when all the crew's members have had enough of one another, and enough of being trapped on a floating hunk of wood in the middle of the ocean together. The whole crew has begun to show the side effects, teasing words reduced to sharp insults, friendly smiles souring with exhaustion and stress. With a first mate absent from the dynamics, and 2 new additions to the ranks, the strain is steadily growing with every passing day. It's only a matter of time before they all reach their breaking point. It starts with a celebration and a song. A gentle melody rings out across the ship, light and trained and beautiful. Nothing like the raucous shanties Technoblade has grown fond of. The voice is just as unfamiliar as the tune and lyrics. Smooth and soft and gentle, yet somehow commanding. Curious, he steps out of his cabin to find the crew gathered together around none other than Wilbur. The man is perched up on a barrel, a flask in one hand, doing his best to lead the crew in a merry song that nobody else knows the words to. It doesn't seem to matter much. His audience is captivated by just his voice alone. All of them, save for one. Phil leans against the railing, far from the crowd. His face is shadowed, curtained by his hair, as he pointedly looks anywhere but at his son. Technoblade approaches quietly, so as not to draw attention. "You okay?" he asks. Phil laughs dryly. "Haven't heard him sing in a while," he says simply. There's a rowdy cheer from the crew as the song ends, a chorus of shouts and applause. Glasses are raised and bottles alongside them, and beside him, Phil lets out a long, weary sigh before pushing himself away from the crowd and moving to join them. There are a few happy greetings murmured as Technoblade follows, loudest of all Tommy, who swaggers over with a grin so wide it must hurt. "Technoblade! Blade, Captain, my man! Nice of you to join the party!" Tommy exclaims, slinging an arm around his shoulders as Technoblade squirms to get away. Beside him, Phil chuckles, clearly taking delight in his suffering. He shoots a pleading look his friend's way, and the man finally caves, rolling his eyes with a fond smile and moving closer. "It's a bit early in the day to be celebrating, don't you think, mate?" Phil quips, deftly snatching the bottle from Tommy's hands and darting playfully away amidst squawks of protest. "The last thing you lot need is more rum. Besides, what are we even celebrating? Our new crew members, of course." The bottle, in Phil's hands, hits the ground with a sharp clatter, rum and glass alike spilling out across the deck. "What the fuck, Phil?" Technoblade is at his side in a heartbeat. "That's not exactly your decision here, Tommy," he grunts, sweeping the shattered remnants into a pile with his boot as best he can. Tommy has the decency to at least look abashed, whereas Wilbur and Fundy look startled and hurt, respectively. "Sorry," Wilbur murmurs, though he doesn't sound very sorry at all. "Guess we got a little carried away." Technoblade fixes him with a firm look. Surprisingly, Phil does as well. His friend's body is angled between Tommy and Wilbur, his shoulders rigid, and it takes Technoblade far longer than he'd care to admit to realize what he's doing. He's protecting Tommy, even if unconsciously, all his frustration and pain temporarily disregarded at the slightest hint of a threat toward his new crew. Technoblade knows then, without a shadow of a doubt, that Phil is willing to do anything to keep history from repeating itself. Only... "What the fuck is wrong with you lately, Phil?" Tommy snaps, pushing past his protective stance to glare at him with his arms crossed, standing rigidly at Wilbur's side. Most times, it's hard to remember that half their crew are children. But now, Tommy looks eerily young, his eyes narrowed defiantly, and his brows furrowed almost petulantly. Tommy is being clingy. Clingy to a random stranger he barely knows, treating him like he's been part of the crew for months rather than days. It would be heartwarming, probably, to see him so attached so quickly, were it not for what Technoblade knows. "Tommy?" Phil starts, but the kid just keeps going. "No, Phil. You've been acting like an ass all week, all gloomy and brooding. You've been treating Wilbur like shit and Fundy too, and they haven't done anything to you. You let Ranboo join, so why not them too?" "Tommy, that's not what, Phil? Fair? Like you're obviously being to them?" "Tommy." This time it's Wilbur speaking, stretching out a hand as if to rest it, consolingly, on Tommy's shoulder. And Phil snarls, hand moving toward his belt, where his pistol rests, waiting. "Don't touch him." Phil? Technoblade and Tommy's horrified voices overlap this time, Technoblade pushing himself between his first mate and his son before he can even think. He turns his back on Wilbur, instead reaching for Phil, his fingers curling firmly around his friend's wrist. "Come on, man. It's not worth it. He's not going to do anything." "You don't know that," Phil hisses, and he sounds simultaneously furious and heartbroken. His voice wet, and his eyes starting to get glassy as he struggles to glare over Technoblade's shoulder at his son. "You don't know what he might do. I can't let anyone else..." Out of the corner of his eye, amidst Phil's rambling, Technoblade can see the crew watching them. Nikki looks aghast, one hand raised to her mouth. Tubba looks torn between delight and anger. Ranboo just looks scared. And he knows without a doubt that Phil would never want his crew to see him like this, with tears pricking at the corner of his eyes, looking so desperate and vulnerable and lost that it makes Technoblade's heart ache. He steps a little closer to Phil in an attempt to shield him from view, all the while murmuring soft reassurances. "Phil," he says, his other hand going to his friend's shoulder. "I won't let anything happen to them, I promise. But you need to calm down. You're going to start saying and doing things you'll regret. I don't think I'll regret any of this. It's clear he doesn't." "I don't know if that's true." "Look, Dad." Wilbur's jaws snap shut, his face going pale, and Phil's along with it. It's a simple slip of the tongue, their situation momentarily forgotten, and yet this new revelation is enough to elicit several surprised murmurs from the crew surrounding them. Eyes widen, mouths hang agape, and Technoblade catches a glimpse of Tommy's face, twisted with revulsion and fury, and some sort of deep hurt. "He's your son?" The kid sounds scandalized. "You said you didn't have a wife, let alone any family." Wilbur flinches at that. Phil's mouth opens and closes wordlessly, his fist clenched, white-knuckled at his side. He shoots a desperate glance Technoblade's way, practically begging for an escape, and so the captain sighs and moves forward, stretching his hands out placatingly. "Tommy, I'm sure he didn't mean to hide. So you're telling me you're treating your own kid like shit?" Tommy's teeth are bared as he barrels over Technoblade's soothing words, and he looks at Phil with so much venom, Technoblade can practically feel its sting. "You just up and moved on with the rest of us, huh?" Tommy has always had a heart for others, dangerously so sometimes, and now his empathy is showing full force, wild and unkempt and almost feral, with Phil on the receiving end of his wrath. "Tommy, that's not what—" Phil's voice is weak and aching, his brow furrowed with confusion and sorrow. "Were we ever more than just a replacement? Are you going to abandon us too?" And oh, maybe this isn't just empathy speaking, but instead a messy pile of emotions and insecurities from the past bubbling up, raw and ugly to the surface. Past wounds reopened, like a hot brand to an old burn. Tommy's scars run deep, and this seems to have torn him as deep as any betrayal. Like, Tubbo and I haven't been through enough of that. What about Ranboo, huh? Was he next? I thought you were better than this, Phil. "Tommy!" Phil gasps, one hand half lifted to his heart, a pained look in his eye. "Tommy, that's enough." Technoblade tries, only to be met with that same white-hot rage and desperation. "You don't mean any of this. I think we all just need to calm down and fuck off. I want to know why Phil went and abandoned his kid like he didn't give up. I abandoned him." Wilbur. The young man has stepped forward, his chest heaving, his arms outstretched as he steps between Tommy and Phil. Behind his glasses, his eyes are shining with unshed tears, his lips twisted into a grimace. He looks distraught, guilt and shame practically radiating from him, and Technoblade is torn between his empathy and his anger. "What?" Tommy sounds nearly breathless in his confusion. "Phil didn't leave me. I left him." "Wilbur, what does that mean?" Tommy searches the man with wide eyes, his anger faltering as confusion takes its place. "What are you saying, man?" "Will?" Phil is staring at Wilbur with a dangerous mixture of bitterness and hope, so wild and desperate that Technoblade almost feels guilty when it crumbles beneath the weight of the rage. Wilbur's confession has finally sunk in, and now Phil is bristling anew, teeth gritted and eyes blazing. Wilbur lifts a hand as if to placate his father, and Phil recoils, swatting it away none too gently. Wilbur makes a soft noise of hurt. "Phil, I'm not gonna— What? Put a gun to my head? Chain me up? Leave me to die again?" Phil's voice is deadly sharp, any hint of grief evaporating in the face of the flames of anger. "What?" This time, Tommy's horror is directed at Wilbur, the boy whirling on the man so fast he actually flinches away from him. You did what?" Wilbur just hangs his head. You bitch! You dick! I fucking trusted you! Tommy is nose to nose with the taller man, bristling like an angry cat ready to swipe. No, that's not... I didn't mean... Really? Because I'm pretty sure that's exactly what you did. Phil's voice is dangerously low, every ounce of repressed fury and hurt boiling beneath the surface of each syllable. I was gonna die, Will. You left me to the fucking Navy. If that ship hadn't sunk, if I hadn't escaped, they would have hung me, Will. You didn't escape? Wilbur asks, suddenly sounding very small and very scared. They actually caught you? Tommy makes a soft noise of confusion, backing down a little as he glances between the two of them, clearly still enraged and uncertain where to direct his emotions. You cuffed me to the fucking wall, Wilbur, Phil snaps. What the hell did you think was gonna happen? I thought... Guys. Jack's call breaks through the chaos, the note of fear in his voice splitting through the argument. Not to ruin this, lovely family reunion, but... And he points west, eyes wide. I'm afraid we've got company. Technoblade follows his gaze to the horizon. A massive ship looms like a shadow in the distance, heavy sails catching the wind and quickly gaining on them as they float, anchored comfortably close to shore. Shit. Phil breathes. Technoblade just nods. A familiar blue flag ripples in the breeze far above, emblazoned with a crest he's come to loathe. A royal warship.